Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Ron and we're in FL Studio. Now the purpose of today's video is to discuss how loud you should make your songs when you are mastering to put them out on a streaming platform. So we're going to look at that just very quickly. It's not going to take very long to explain. So today, rather than to remain in FL Studio, we're actually going to be in RX9. RX9 is a plugin by Izotope, and it's like an audio editor, similar to Edison in FL Studio, but like it's super unlikely that you don't know what RX9 and RX10 are if you make music. They're like the industry standard for audio editing. Okay, so if you ever heard of the Loudness wars, there was this commonly held belief that for you to make music better, that it had to really be super loud, right? So, because we have limiters and we have compressors, you could decrease the dynamic range of music or whatever sound by however much you want. And then we will perceive it as being closer and louder because that's the way that we perceive sound after it is turned up, right? Now, in this case, here we have an example of a track that someone sent to me asking for me to check it out and basically see if I noticed anything that was like wrong. So, okay, if you're going to put this out, you have to understand that as a response to the loudness wars, the streaming services like Spotify, like Apple Music, YouTube Music, even YouTube itself, they put standards in place to keep it so that the volume level of music is normalized. The same thing exists on the radio and on TV. So you don't have to master your music to be so very loud anymore. And I want to just explain what will happen as the result, because you could still master it very loud, but it's not always the best thing to do, and you want to make sure it's not too loud. So here, I am in RX9, and when you're in RX9 or RX10, if you hold down Alt and press D, you get this small window that comes up, and it just quickly analyzes the file of whatever sound you've put into it. So here I have the song loaded. I'm not going to play it because it's not my song to release, but I'm using it to give feedback to this person and to explain this through the video, how to go about fixing this problem. So if you look here at the true peak level, true peaks are also known as intersample peaks, because when music or sounds are recorded, they're recorded the same way that a video camera records video. So frames per second is the name for it rapidly taking pictures when a video is recorded. That's why you can slow them down and see the different instances. It's kind of like when you draw a whole bunch of pictures and then you put them in a flip book and you flip them downwards and it looks like it's moving. That's also the basis for animation. In music, the same thing happens, and when recording sound, but the samples happen a lot more rapidly. So if you've ever seen like 44.1 kilohertz, that's the sample rate, and it means that it's taking 44,000 samples per second. So obviously, the more samples that you have, the higher the fidelity. But sometimes sound can move so fast that even though you put a limiter on something, there's a spike in the sound in between the samples and the limiter is unable to catch it. So then you have true peaks. And what that means is that when the sound is converted from being digital and is converted to being analog, such as when it comes out of a speaker, the actual level that it's going to peak at can be substantially higher than the level that it shows in your DAW. So the sample peak level, as you can see, is 0.2 or negative 0.2 decibels, roughly. And it's negative 0.3. And you can expect that there's like a little bit of disparity. Maybe the sounds on the left side are louder. But the true peak level is over 1. It's almost 2 decibels. In the digital domain, that would mean that the song is clipping, if it were to be the case for the sample peak. So what seems to have happened here is that the song was mastered to be as loud as it possibly could be, but there are sounds that are peaking past the limiter. So what will happen is that if you send this song to Spotify or any of the streaming services as it is, they're going to convert it to MP3 and it's going to cause distortion. So that is the reason why you don't want to have your songs peaking above like -1. But the question would be, how do you know? So that's what I'm going to show you now. But I had to explain all of that for it to make sense. So there are a few things that are important to consider, right? First of all, you got the integrated loudness. And here you can see it's -9.6 LUFS. When you're preparing a song for a streaming website, it's got to be at least -14 LUFS, or they're going to turn it up and it may not sound good. So if it's louder, as far as LUFS, from what I've seen, that doesn't make such a big deal. They'll just turn it down because they want the volume to be normalized from song to song. They want to have a positive experience for the listener when it reaches them. So they don't want to have one song be really quiet and then the next song be really loud, because if a person's listening in their car, they're going to have one song and it's going to be really quiet. So they're going to turn it up and then the loud song is going to hurt their ears. And then let's say if it were Spotify or whatever is the case, they'll stop listening, and the company doesn't want that because then the customers won't be pleased and they will lose money. But of course, the customers also won't like your song, and because we perceive things as better when they sound loud, they they won't like it less. They'll feel like the song is too quiet and it doesn't have enough impact, which is the problem that gave birth to the loudness wars in the first place, because songs are thought to be more commercially viable and even more like entertaining to us. We feel like they're better because they're louder. But basically, you got to overcome that and think about what will happen as the end result. So I'm going to show you two things real quick, and then two ways to look at this or to detect this problem, and then we'll call it a day. So the first way is obviously if you've got RX, as I said earlier, you can hold down Alt and press D, and this window will come up, right? When you get to integrated loudness, you want to make sure this is -14 LUFS or higher. The true peak level, it should be -1 dB or lower. Preferably just -1 dB, you know? That's like the simple way to put it. And if you look here, the momentary loudness and the short-term loudness, it shows momentary is a certain amount of time. I think it's like 400 milliseconds. So you can see that the track remains loud most of the time. That's basically what it says right here. The integrated loudness is an average measurement of how loud it is across the entire song. And that's the one that is most important, because -14 LUFS is the standard. So I'm going to show you two things. And the first one is going to be pertaining to FL Studio or just any limiter. So in RX9 or RX in general, you can add a plugin from outside. And that's what this does. So here I have Maximus, which is inherent to FL Studio. But I've added it here so that I could show this. And actually, before starting the video, I ran Maximus over the track to see the difference it would make if I just was to have a limiter that was at 0 dB. So if I click this, it shows the difference with the limiter at 0 decibels, right? Now you can see when it loads that the true peak level goes down from being almost 2 dB to just 1, you know? But what this says is that the limiter still wasn't able to catch every single peak. So the point that I want to emphasize here is that I actually ran this limiter as if I were like creating the song and using this as the final limiter. I didn't change anything. I just left it at 0. But it still didn't catch everything. So you don't want to assume that just because you put a limiter on something that it's going to catch every single peak, right? Limiters have look ahead and they are very fast, but they won't necessarily catch every spike in audio. And you may not notice because it may not clip in your DAW. So what I did after that was I went to gain because it's obvious that most people are going to normalize to reach 0 decibels and then they're going to turn it down. So this is my simulation of that, right? If I were making the track, I might try to normalize to 0 dB. And then I would check and see if the true peak is above 0. But either way, I'd be prepared to turn it down. So then I put minus 2.10. I turn it down. And you will notice when it loads, if you look here, the integrated loudness is negative 13.2, which is still loud enough. You know, so it's just got to be above negative 14. And even having turned it down by this much, now you can see this is negative 1.09, right? They're both below negative 1. So now if you submit it to Spotify and the levels are correct like this, the compression that they add to it is not going to cause it to clip. And that's the entire point. It's still loud enough down here. So you don't have to really stress out trying to make your song hyper loud. It's not like a big deal anymore. So that's one way. If you have RX9, RX10, whichever version, you can hit Alt-D. It'll show you this there. But the other way that I would do it is I would use Insight. So Insight is another Izotope plugin that can be used to measure the levels of different things. And to my knowledge, FL Studio does not have an inherent way to measure LUFS yet. And it does not measure true peaks yet, as far as I know. So you need a plugin like Insight. But the difference between something like Insight and like RX is that Insight has to listen to the entirety of the track. So if I were playing it, right, and in RX you got to hit the preview button, it's going to tell me over time how loud it is. So you can see negative 13, and the true peak is here at any given time. Again, I'm obviously not going to play the song because it's not my song to play. But you can see negative 1.7. And as long as it doesn't go above negative 1 while it's listening to the entire track, it should be fine. Because here, it's only listened to part of it and it hasn't listened to the quiet part. So it's registering as even higher. It's negative 12, where before it was negative 13. Of course, RX gave the correct measurement. It is like negative 13 point something. But this is just to prove the point. I wanted to go to the louder part of the track, and you see it never goes above negative 1.1. So it's not going to clip when you submit it to Spotify. And, well, that's basically it. So to summarize just one more time, you don't want your song being above a true peak level of negative 1 decibels. And the minimum level in LUFS is negative 14 LUFS. Then you can submit it to the streaming platforms and it'll be fine, you know. And when you use a distributor, they even warn you about that. And they even have things in place so that it will check to make sure that it is the right volume and that it's not too loud or too quiet. So that's everything I wanted to show you in this video. It's pretty quick. And I hope that this is able to help you. Like, comment, and subscribe. If you felt like you gained something from this and you want to see more, leave comments about what you would like to see or any suggestions you may have. And with that, thank you for watching. Have an awesome day. Peace.